Is this really what my life became? The grease smell clung to my uniform. My feet ached from 6 hours on cracked linoleum. My back. God, my back. 8 months along, and the only chair in this place was the one the manager used, and he didn't offer it. I'm Valentina Caruso, 26 years old, ex-wife of a man most people never see twice and never forget once. I walked away from that world 14 months ago with nothing but the clothes I packed in 20 minutes, and the thing growing inside me that I didn't yet know was there. I came to this diner because rent was due, because the savings were gone, because there are exactly two kinds of pride, the kind that keeps you warm and the kind that doesn't. I had been choosing the wrong kind. Then the door opened. I heard the room change before I turned around. That specific silence, the kind that falls when something dangerous enters a space and everyone's body understands it before their brain does. I turned, and 14 months of distance collapsed in the space of one breath. His eyes found mine, dropped to my belly, came back to my face. The table he was standing next to went sideways. Plates, coffee cups, someone's slice of cherry pie, all of it, airborne. And then his voice, that voice, low as a fault line, and twice as destructive. That child is mine. Get in the car. Everything was about to change, and you're going to watch it happen. The coffee pot was half empty, and the man at table 7 wanted a refill for the 3rd time. I smiled. That was the job. I smiled and I refilled and I said, "Of course, sir." And I thought about the $47 I had made in tips so far, and whether that was enough to cover the gap in the electric bill, or whether I was going to be doing homework by candlelight again. Except I didn't do homework anymore. I had dropped out of my art restoration program 11 months ago when the money ran out and the commute became impossible and the standing became the kind of problem that arrives at 8 months and doesn't negotiate. The diner was called Halstead's. It had been called that since 1974 according to the sign, and it looked like it had last been renovated in 1974 and smelled, faintly and permanently, of burnt oil and old ambition. The linoleum had a pattern once. I could see the ghost of it near the door where fewer feet had passed. I noticed things like that. What was there before the damage? Occupational hazard of a mind trained to read paintings for their original intention. I noticed the room change before I saw him. It was a sound first, or the absence of one, the specific quality of silence that falls when a predator enters a space, and every prey animal in the vicinity goes very, very still. The man at table 7 stopped mid-sentence. The 2 women by the window stopped laughing. Jimmy, the cook, went quiet through the pass-through, and Jimmy had not been quiet in the 3 weeks I'd worked here, not once. I turned around. The door was still closing behind him. Dante Caruso stood inside Halstead's diner on a Tuesday evening in February, in a charcoal overcoat that cost more than this building's monthly lease, and he looked exactly the same as the last time I had seen him. Controlled, still, dangerous. The way deep water is dangerous, not because it moves, but because it doesn't have to. His eyes found me in less than a second. They dropped to my belly, came back to my face. And God help me. I did not run. I did not flinch. I was 8 months pregnant and my back hurt, and I had been on my feet for 6 hours and I was simply completely structurally beyond the reach of terror. There was nothing left in me to perform, so I just looked at him. Steady, tired, present. I watched something happen in his face that I had never seen there before. He crossed the room in 8 steps. I counted. When he stopped in front of me, I had to look up. The way I always had. He was a foot taller, and I had always hated how aware I was of that, how it felt less like intimidation and more like physics. He said nothing. He looked at me. He looked at the bump that was his child, though he didn't know it yet, though something animal and ancient in him seemed to already know. Valentina. His voice, low, the kind of low that doesn't need volume. Dante, mine, steady. 14 months of practice in being steady. His jaw moved. His eyes went to my name tag. the cheap plastic one with Valentina in letters pressed by a machine that also pressed the names of people who had chosen this life rather than arrived at it by catastrophic accident. His eyes came back to my face. How long, he said, not a question. A reckoning. 8 months. Another silence. I watched him do what Dante always did, put everything inside a container so nothing showed on the surface. But the container was cracking. I could see it at the edges of his eyes, in the way his hand came up and then stopped before it touched anything. He turned, found the nearest table. A four-top with 2 customers who scrambled backward without being asked. He looked at it for 1 moment. Then he picked it up and threw it. Not in rage. In the specific, deliberate way Dante did everything, with full intention and without apology. Plates and glasses and someone's cherry pie described an arc through the air and landed in a cascade of porcelain and glass. And nobody in Halstead's made a sound. He turned back to me. That child is mine. His voice had dropped another register. Quiet as a verdict. Get in the car. I looked at him. I thought about the $47 in tips in my apron pocket. I thought about the electric bill. I thought about 14 months of surviving alone, of every decision I had made in the absence of better options, of the night I had left with 20 minutes and nothing else, and the reason someone had given me for why I had to go. You can't just, I started. I know. He cut me off, not cruelly, almost gently. Which was worse. I know I can't. I'm asking. He shrugged off his overcoat and put it around my shoulders without waiting for permission. The warmth of it hit me before the cold had fully registered, the residual heat of his body in the wool, as if he had reached out and held me rather than just handed me fabric. I felt it settle over my shoulders, over the bump, like something that had been waiting. I had not been warm in a very long time. I looked up at him. He was watching me with an expression I could not fully read. The careful, quiet devastation of a man discovering the specific shape of what his absence had cost. Piccola, he said. The word landed like the first one, like a stone dropped into still water. Not warm. Not cold, just there. A classification, a naming. I did not tell him to stop. I untied my apron, folded it, set it on the counter. Found Jimmy watching through the pass-through with wide eyes. I won't be in tomorrow, I said. Jimmy nodded quickly. He was not going to argue with the man who had just thrown a table in his diner, and I did not blame him. I walked out beside Dante Caruso into the February night. The car was a black SUV. Of course it was. There were 2 men standing near it who had materialized from somewhere. I hadn't seen them enter, I hadn't seen them exist, and yet there they were, the way the furniture of his world always appeared. Already in place, already oriented toward him. He opened the door himself. I got in. The warmth of the car wrapped around me, the warmth of his coat around my shoulders, and the thing I had been holding carefully closed for 14 months. The feeling I had packed away in the same 20 minutes I'd packed my clothes, shifted in my chest. I put my hand on my belly. She moved. She always moved when I was frightened or exhausted or trying very hard not to feel something. My daughter, already my collaborator in the project of keeping myself together, Dante got on the other side. The door closed with the specific, sealed sound of a very expensive car. A sound like an airlock, like the pressurized click of one world ending and another beginning. He did not start talking immediately. That was always the most Dante thing about him. He understood the architecture of silence. He gave me 1 full minute in the car before he spoke, and I had not realized until that moment how desperately I had missed being given that kind of room. Are you all right? He asked. I'm fine. You've been fine for 14 months? Yes. He looked at me. Something shifted at the corner of his mouth. Not a smile, but the ghost of one arriving and then choosing not to land. Tell me about the baby, he said. I'm 8 months along. She's healthy. I've been seeing a midwife at the county clinic. She's good. He absorbed that. One hand on his knee. Still. And the father? He stopped himself, recalibrated. Something moved through his expression like weather moving through a landscape, fast and total. I'm the father. It was not a question. Yes. The silence that followed was not like other silences. It had weight and temperature. I sat inside it and felt it pressing against my ribs, and I thought, this is where it starts again. Whatever this was going to be, this thing that his roar had begun in that diner, it started here, in this car, in the dark, with the warmth of his coat around me and his daughter moving beneath my hands. I didn't know, he said finally. I know you didn't. Why didn't you? He stopped again. His jaw worked. Never mind. Not now, but later. That was Dante. He didn't abandon a question. He filed it and waited until he could approach it properly. The car moved through Chicago streets, through amber light and slick asphalt and the particular cold of a city that doesn't apologize for its winters. I watched the city through the window and I thought about the painting I had last studied. A Baroque portrait, badly overcleaned by a previous restorer. The original glaze stripped back too far. You could see what had been done to it in the damage. You could work backward and know what had been there. What was still there, underneath? If you knew how to look. I was very good at reading damage. I was less certain I was good at surviving what came next. The door had closed behind us. Everything before it was already in the past. The Caruso house had not changed. I knew it would not have changed. Dante was not a man who rearranged things. He decided where something belonged, and it stayed there, and the world reorganized itself around his decisions. The house on Lakeshore Drive was a 1920s limestone manor that had been in the family since Dante's grandfather had bought it for cash in 1967, which was the kind of sentence that told you everything you needed to know about the Caruso family's relationship to legitimate wealth. It was nearly 10 o'clock when we arrived. The drive had taken 40 minutes and neither of us had spoken much. He had asked if I was hungry. I was. He had called someone on his phone and spoken briefly in Italian, and when we arrived, there was food waiting. Rosa was in the kitchen. She looked at me the way she always had. Not with warmth exactly, but with a very specific kind of attention, the kind a woman gives when she is deciding whether you are worth the trouble of caring about. The last time she had looked at me that way, I had been 23 years old and newly married, and I had made her a cup of espresso correctly on the first attempt, which she had considered an adequate credential. Now her eyes went to my belly and her expression shifted into something more complicated. She crossed the kitchen in 4 steps and put both hands on my face and looked at me. Idiota, she said, and it was not directed at me. Rosa, Dante said from the doorway. She released my face and turned to look at her nephew with the precise, devastating energy of a woman who has been waiting 14 months to say something and has been very carefully composing it. Sit, she told me instead, and pointed at a chair at the kitchen table. I sat. Gratefully. The chair had cushions. I had not sat in a cushioned chair since November. She brought food, soup, bread, the kind of meal that communicated I have decided you matter without saying so. I ate while she moved around the kitchen and Dante stood in the doorway and the silence between them communicated an entire conversation I was not privy to. I've had the East Room prepared, he said finally. Good, she said. Then, to me, you'll sleep. Tomorrow we talk. Tonight you sleep. I don't need you need, she said firmly. You've been not needing for too long. That's finished. I looked at the soup in front of me. The warmth of it, the warmth of the kitchen, the warmth, still, of his coat which I was still wearing because I had not been asked to remove it. Rosa, I said, I should tell you, this isn't, I know what this is and what it isn't, she said. Eat your soup. The East Room was the one at the corner of the 2nd floor, with 2 windows and a view of the lake. It had been the guest room when I lived here. Now it had been made into something else. There was a rocking chair by one window that had not been there before, and a small lamp on the nightstand at a height convenient for reading in bed, and the mattress was the kind that did not require negotiation. Lucas showed me to it. He was 29 and quiet in the way that men are quiet when they have made a career of not being noticed. He opened the door and stepped back and looked at me with the specific expression of a man delivering information he has been told to deliver casually. "He doesn't sleep," Luca said. I looked at him. "What? Mr. Caruso? He doesn't sleep. Usually 3-4 hours. If you hear him moving around the house, it's just him. So you know." He was gone before I could respond. I stood in the doorway of the east room and thought about that. About Dante moving through this limestone house at 2 in the morning while I lay in the room at the corner with 2 windows. About what a man does with the hours most people spend unconscious. I thought about it longer than I should have. I put my hand on my belly and went inside and closed the door. I slept 10 hours. I woke at 8 to the sound of the lake, which was a sound the city never entirely covered, and lay there for a while listening to it before I remembered where I was and why and what was going to happen today. Then I remembered the coffee. There was a coffee maker on the nightstand, a small, good one, with a note that said, in handwriting that was not Dante's and not Rosa's, "Decaf only. Doctor's orders. Don't argue with me about it. M." I stared at the note for a moment. M. I made the decaf. It was, inexplicably, excellent decaf. I was still in bed, cup in hand, when the knock came. "Come in." Dante entered. He was dressed already, dark trousers, a gray shirt, no tie. He looked like a man who had been awake for several hours, which Luca had informed me was essentially always the case. He carried nothing. He was simply, economically himself, standing in the doorway. "How did you sleep?" he asked. "Well." A pause. "Better than I have in a while," he nodded, as if this was information he was cataloging for some specific future purpose. Then he came in and sat in the chair across from the bed, the rocking chair by the window, which I now noticed was positioned so that whoever sat in it could see both the door and the lake. Dante always knew where the exits were. "I have questions," he said. "I know. You don't have to answer all of them today. But you'd prefer it." Something moved at the corner of his mouth. "Yes." I set the coffee down, sat up. The morning light was coming in off the lake, and it fell across the bed, and I was 8 months pregnant in a rocking chair in the house of the man I had been married to, and everything about this was impossible. And here we were. "Ask," I said. "Who told you to leave?" The question landed with the specific weight of a man who had been holding it for some time, not all 14 months. I didn't think he'd known I'd left by choice or by someone's direction. Or maybe he had. Maybe he'd wondered. "I was told," I said carefully, "that you had decided the marriage was done, that it had served its purpose, that there would be a settlement and arrangements made, and that continuing to occupy your house would be—" I stopped. Found the word. "Embarrassing. For you." The silence that followed was very long. "Who told you that?" he said. Not a question. The words of a man arriving at something cold and certain. A man I trusted. Someone I had no reason to doubt. A name. "Not yet," I said, because I did not know yet if I was safe to say it. I did not know yet what being back in this house meant for the things I had survived outside of it. He looked at me. I looked back at him, level and steady, the way I had looked at him in the diner. I watched him register it again. That same thing that had happened in his face when I'd done it the first time. That slight, involuntary shift, like a man encountering a wall where he had expected empty space. "All right," he said finally. "Not yet." The man who had left the coffee note appeared at 11. He was stocky, olive-skinned, wearing a very expensive suit and an expression of concentrated suffering. He appeared in the kitchen doorway while I was eating breakfast. Rosa had produced eggs from somewhere and toast, and more excellent decaf. And he looked at me with the expression of a man who has rehearsed this meeting and discovered the script was inadequate. "You must be Marco," I said. "Marco Vitelli." He came in and sat down across from me with the careful movements of a man managing a fragile internal situation. "Consigliere, and I think I'm having a cardiac event." Rosa at the stove did not look up. "You said that Tuesday." Tuesday it passed. "This one feels different. There's a pressure." He pressed a hand to his sternum. "Right here, since breakfast." "You ate 4 pastries at breakfast," Rosa said. "I ate 3. That's... He looked at me. She has never counted correctly, not once, 22 years. He put the hand down, looked at my belly with an expression of sudden recalibration. So, you're back. Apparently, he drove to the diner himself. Do you know how long it's been since Dante Caruso drove himself somewhere? He paused for effect. 14 months. Exactly. I set down my fork. He drove himself to the airport, Marco continued with the air of a man delivering meaningful data. The night after. He went to the office. He drove. 6:15 in the morning. I know because Luca called me and said the boss is driving himself, and I said, Luca, are you having a stroke? Marco, Rosa said, I'm providing context. He straightened, touched his sternum again. Also, I genuinely think something is wrong with my heart. Does it feel warm in here to you? It feels warm in here because there is a stove, Rosa said. Dr. Tev, Jen said last week that mild chest pressure in men my age. She said it was indigestion. She said it was likely indigestion. Those are different words. He looked at me again. His eyes were, I realized, quite kind under the performance. Welcome back, Mrs. Caruso. I'm not. I stopped. Looked at my coffee. It's Valentina. He nodded seriously. Valentina. He nodded seriously. Valentina. A pause. You know he's going to fix this. There's a lot to fix. Yes, Marco agreed, but you should know, for context, that the last time I saw him lose control of a situation was at his father's funeral. Before that, I can't remember. He touched his chest one more time, and yesterday he threw a table in a diner on Halsted Street. The kitchen was quiet. He really should have someone look at his blood pressure, Marco said thoughtfully. While we're on the subject of cardiac health. Rosa finally turned from the stove. She looked at Marco with the expression of a woman containing, with great difficulty, something that was not quite a smile. He caught it. His eyes went very briefly, involuntarily, soft. What? He said. Nothing, Rosa said. Eat something. I'm watching my sodium. Since when? Since Dr. Chen mentioned. Dios mío, Rosa said and turned back to the stove. I ate my eggs and did not hide my smile and thought, whatever comes next. At least this part is real. That afternoon, Luca knocked on the door of the east room where I had retreated to rest. Mr. Caruso would like to speak with you, he said. In the study. When you're ready. I thought about the name I hadn't given Dante yet. About the man who had sent me away and the reason he'd had for doing it, which I still did not entirely understand. About the fact that I was in this house and there was a reason someone had not wanted me here. I'll be down in 10 minutes, I said. Luca nodded. Started to leave. Luca, I said. He turned back. He really doesn't sleep. 3 hours, Luca said. Maybe 4, on a good night. A pause. He started working out at 4 in the morning, after you left. He delivered this with the flat affect of a man who has decided it is a relevant fact and therefore should be included. Just so you know. He left. I sat on the edge of the bed in the east room and put both hands on my belly and felt her move, and I thought, I am going to need to be very careful here, and very brave, and I am not sure I am either of those things, but I am going to have to become them. The door at the end of the hall was already open. The study smelled of old wood and paper, and beneath that, the particular scent of a man who had been working in a room for hours, something cool and controlled that arrived before him and lingered after. Cedar and something colder underneath. The smell of him. I had not prepared myself for how specific it would be. How familiar. I stood in the doorway for a moment before he noticed me. He was at the desk, reading something, physical papers, which was characteristic. Dante did not trust digital records with anything that mattered. He had a pen in one hand and was annotating in the margins, small precise marks, and his brow was slightly furrowed in the way it always was when he was concentrating on something that required actual thought rather than reaction. He had not shaved, not dramatically unshaved, just by a day, maybe 2. He looked, in the angle of the morning light coming through the window, like a man who had spent 14 months in a room with a problem he could not solve. I thought about what Marco had told me, about the driving, the 4 a.m. workouts, the 3 hours of sleep on a good night. I filed it away with everything else I was still deciding what to do with. "Valentina," he said without looking up. He always knew when someone entered a room. "You wanted to talk. Sit." I sat in the chair across the desk. The one visitors sat in, I understood. The chair positioned so that he could see you fully and you had to account for yourself. I was not going to perform an accounting. I straightened my back, which was a commitment in the 8th month. He set down the pen, looked at me. "The baby," he said. "What do you need?" "I need a lot of things, Dante. Most of them aren't the kind you can acquire. What are the ones I can?" This was so specifically, perfectly Dante that I had to look at the window for a moment. The practical directness of him. The refusal to enter emotional territory without a map, except that he was always building the map in real time. Prenatal care. A good OB, not just the county midwife. She's excellent, but I need someone with hospital privileges when the time comes. A safe place to stay until after the birth. After that, I stopped. "After that," he said, waiting. "After that, we need to talk about what this looks like, what you want, and what I can agree to. You think there's a version of this where you raise my child alone. I think there's a version of this where we figure out what we are to each other now. That's different from before." He was quiet for a moment. Not the quiet of processing, the quiet of a man who already knew the answer and was deciding whether to say it now or later. He said it later, which was Dante's way. "Tell me about the 14 months, he said instead, "where you went, what you did." And I told him, not everything, not the name, not the specific conversation that had sent me out the door, but the rest of it, the first apartment, the one with the mold in the ceiling that I didn't notice for 3 weeks, the freelance work, digitizing archival photographs for a museum outreach program, which paid almost enough. The discovery, at what I'd thought was flu, that I was 8 weeks along, the conversation with the midwife that had recalibrated everything. He listened the way Dante listened. Completely still, completely present, every word going somewhere specific. He did not interrupt. He did not perform sympathy. He simply received everything I told him with his full attention, and somehow that was worse than anger would have been. "The art restoration program," he said when I finished. "You stopped." "I couldn't. I know why you stopped. I'm saying, that was yours. That was something you had." I looked at him. "Yes, you'll go back to it. Dante, when the baby is old enough, when you're ready, you'll go back." He said it the way he said most things. Not as a command exactly, but as a fact that had not yet arrived and therefore required announcing. "That's not your decision," I said. "No," he agreed. "It's yours, but I'm telling you what I know about how this ends. You were good at it." I had been good at it. I knew the language of damaged things. I knew how to read the record of what had happened to a painting in the layers of its surface, in the quality of the cracking, in the way certain pigments faded and others did not. I knew how to look at something ruined and identify what was worth saving. I had not thought, until right now, sitting across from Dante Caruso in the study I had sat in many times before, that this was also a description of what I was doing here. I looked away. Outside the window, the lake was gray and wind-furrowed. A cold day, the kind Chicago specialized in, aggressive and honest about its hostility. "I need to tell you something," I said, "about why I left. But I need you to listen without reacting until I finish." He folded his hands on the desk. "Go ahead." Someone came to me. 14 months ago, someone I had reason to trust. Someone inside your world, not outside it. They told me you had made a decision about the marriage, that it was strategic from the beginning and you'd gotten what you needed from it, and the arrangement was concluded. I paused. They told me that continuing to stay would create problems for you. They were very specific about what kind of problems. They were very convincing. Dante's hands were very still. They told me there would be a settlement, and that if I left cleanly, without complication, you would make sure I was taken care of. They had documentation. Things that looked official, with the family letterhead. I stopped. I know how that sounds. I know I should have. You trusted someone you had reason to trust, he said. His voice had gone quiet in a specific way. Not cold, something colder than cold. The quality of a man who has identified a problem and is already calculating its resolution. And they used that trust to remove you from this house. Yes. With documents that appeared to come from me. Yes. 14 months ago. Yes. He was very quiet. Dante, I didn't send anyone to you, he said. There was no settlement. There was no decision. Each sentence its own contained thing. When I found you gone, I assumed. He stopped. Started again. I assumed you had made a choice. I assumed. Another stop. His jaw worked. I assumed it was your choice. We looked at each other, the specific tragedy of that passed between us in the silence. The assumption he had made, the lie I had been told. 14 months in the negative space between those two things. I need the name, he said. I know. It's not about, I'm not asking for. He stopped, recalibrated with visible effort. I need the name because they are still in this house, still in my world. And you are here now, and the baby is here, and if they knew you had returned— I know, I said. I understand the risk. Then tell me. I looked at him. At the controlled devastation in his face, at the man who had driven himself to the airport at 6:15 in the morning and started working out at 4 a.m., and hadn't stopped running at whatever he ran at for 14 months. Salvatore Greco, I said. My uncle's name in my own mouth. He came to me the afternoon before I left. He had everything. He was— I took a breath. He was very certain, and I had no reason not to believe him. Dante's face did something complicated and then went completely still. Your uncle, he said. Yes. He stood up. Not in anger. Dante never moved in anger. Not in the way other men did. He moved with purpose. He went to the window and stood with his back to me, looking at the gray lake, and I watched the line of his shoulders and the very careful quality of his stillness. And I knew he was doing what he always did when something required processing that could not be rushed. You should rest, he said finally, to the window. Dante, I'm not going to do anything rash. He turned back. His face had settled into something I recognized, the controlled, operational version of him, the one that came after the processing. But I need to think. And I need you to be safe while I do, which means the house, for now. I pushed myself to my feet. My back protested. His hand was there before I registered it moving. His palm against the small of my back, brief and warm and careful, steadying me, then gone. I felt the warmth of it after the touch had ended, the specific temperature of his hands. It stayed with me all the way back to the east room. A threat was already moving. I had felt it the way you feel a pressure change before a storm, not in any single fact, but in the weight of the air around all of them. Someone in this house had already known I was back. Someone had already started making calculations. I lay on the bed in the east room with both hands on my belly and looked at the ceiling and thought about paintings, about the layers of damage, about the original work underneath, still there, still structured, still, if you knew how to look, entirely recoverable, maybe. The OB Dante found was a woman named Dr. Kersage, Elise Park, who worked out of Northwestern Memorial and had the specific energy of someone who had delivered 4,000 babies and was not impressed by either the mob or the mob's money, but was satisfied that I was healthy and the baby was healthy, and that I was finally, at 34 weeks, in the care of someone with a genuine delivery team. She asked me, in the exam room, if I was safe. I thought about the question seriously. Yes, I said. She looked at me the way women look at each other when they are deciding whether to believe what they've heard. Then she nodded and moved on. And I was grateful for both the question and the decision. Dante had not come in for the appointment. He had sat in the waiting room, which I found out afterward from Luca, who found out from the front desk. He had apparently spent reading a parenting magazine with the complete, careful attention he gave everything, front to back, twice. The drive back was quiet, not uncomfortable. The particular quality of quiet that exists between two people who have said something true to each other and are now adjusting to the new weight of it. She said you're both healthy, he said. She did. Good. A pause. She said the next 4 weeks. She gave me the same information she gave you in the pamphlet. He glanced at me sideways. I didn't take a pamphlet. Luca told me about the magazine. A very long pause. It was informative, he said finally, with great dignity. Something cracked open in my chest. It felt dangerous. I looked out the window. We were passing through Lincoln Park, the good kind of cold, the bare tree and gray sky kind that had its own kind of beauty, if you were not miserable. And I was not miserable, and that was the problem. Marco was in the kitchen when we returned. He was sitting at the table with a glass of water and an expression of concentrated self-diagnosis. There it is again, he said, pressing his hand to his chest. Hello, Marco, I said. Did you know that cardiac events in otherwise healthy men in their late 30s can present as mild discomfort? He looked at me with great seriousness. I called Dr. Chen's office this morning. She said, and I am quoting, Marco, you called last Thursday about the same thing and it was gas. He paused. She was not warm about it. Marco, Rosa said from the doorway, she is a doctor. You call her 6 times a week. She's a professional. She is not going to be warm. I'm a patient, Marco said. Warmth is a clinical standard. You are a patient who called her on a Sunday about a hangnail, a potentially infected hangnail. There's a basta. Marco subsided. He looked at me with the expression of a man seeking allied support. You understand, right? You've had actual medical appointments. You know how important follow-up care is? I do, I said carefully. See? He pointed at Rosa. She agrees. I said I understood follow-up care. I did not say calling your doctor about a hangnail constitutes follow-up care. Rosa made a sound of satisfaction. Marco looked betrayed. Dante had gone directly to his office. I sat down at the kitchen table. My back was announcing itself again, and Rosa appeared with a cup of tea without being asked. He went to that diner every week, Rosa said, not looking at me. She was cutting something at the counter. The knife made clean, even sounds. I looked up. For 11 months, she said, every Tuesday. He would eat there. A pause. I don't know what he was looking for. Or maybe I do. He kept going back. Rosa. I'm not saying anything, she said. Just context. I wrapped my hands around the teacup, the warmth of it. Everything warm today. The fall happened at 11 that night. I had gotten up to use the bathroom. This was my life now, this precise negotiation with my own body. And on the way back, I misjudged the step down into the hallway in the dark and went sideways. My hand caught the wall. I did not fall, but I stumbled badly and I made a sound, and the sound was apparently enough, because 30 seconds later Dante was there. He came out of the dark of the house the way he always materialized, without announcement, already fully present. He was in a gray shirt and dark trousers and no shoes, which meant he had been awake. He had always been awake. And he put both hands on my arms before I fully registered him. Are you all right? I didn't fall, I said. The step. Are you hurt? No. I'm fine. Dante. But he was already moving, one hand staying on my arm, the other going to the wall, turning on the sconce light so the hallway was illuminated. He looked at me with the particular focus of a man checking for damage, and I thought again about paintings, about the way you held a light close and looked for cracks. And then I stopped thinking about paintings because his hands were still on my arms, and I was aware of their warmth through my sleeves. The step needs a light, he said. I know the step. I used to live here. The step still needs a light. He looked at me. In the low warmth of the sconce light, his face was softer, was not quite the word, more present. The careful professional stillness reduced by exactly one layer. You should have woken me. You were awake. Still. I looked at him. He looked at me. We were close in the narrow hallway, and I was 8 months pregnant, and his hands were on my arms, and neither of us moved for a moment that was too long to be accidental. I should go back to bed, I said. Yes, he said. He did not move. Dante. I know. He stepped back. One hand stayed, briefly, just his palm against my arm, above the elbow, for one more second, the warmth of it. Then that too was gone. He turned toward the step. I'll have Luca put a light here tomorrow. Thank you. I went back to the east room, lay down, put my hand on my belly and felt her shift and settle, and I stared at the ceiling in the dark and thought about the quality of restraint in a man who could have done something and chose not to. He stops because she matters to him. I was not ready to follow that thought to its destination, but I lay awake for a long time in the east room, and I thought about his hands, and I thought about the warmth of them, and I thought about a man who drove himself to the airport at 6:15 in the morning and ate at a diner every Tuesday for 11 months. In the morning, he was at the desk in the study, reading the same stack of papers. But there was something different about his face. The operational stillness was back, tighter, if anything. He had received information overnight and processed it and arrived somewhere new. Salvatore Greco, he said, without preamble, when I appeared in the doorway. Dante, he has been stealing from the family for approximately 2 years. Not large amounts. Careful amounts. The kind that disappear into the margin between what the books show and what they should show if you're looking at it correctly. He set the papers down. My people missed it. I missed it. He had the access because of the connection to you, to us. And he used that access and protected himself by removing you. I felt the understanding land slowly, like cold water finding its level. He sent me away, I said, so I wouldn't find it. You were in the finances, Dante said. When you were here, you helped with the restoration accounts, the legitimate business. You would have seen it eventually. He knew I'd see it. Yes. I sat down in the visitor chair. My hands were in my lap. My uncle, my father's brother, the man who had sat across from me 14 months ago with very convincing documents and a very specific kind of regret in his voice. He kept checking on me, I said slowly, after I left, calling, sending money when it got very bad. I stopped. I thought he felt guilty about delivering the news. He was making sure you stayed away, Dante said, and monitoring what you knew. The cold of it was very specific. Not the dramatic cold of betrayal. I had survived enough of that already, but the precise gray cold of discovering that someone had calculated you, had weighed you against a ledger and found you to be a useful variable. I'm sorry, Dante said. I looked at him. He met my eyes without flinching. He was your family. The use of that's not. He stopped. I'm sorry, you didn't do it. People in my world did. Using your name and your trust. His jaw tightened. That's mine to carry. We sat in that for a moment. 2 people in a study on Lakeshore Drive on a Wednesday morning, looking at the wreckage of 14 months. What happens now? I asked. Now, Dante said. I'm very careful. Because you're here, and the baby is here, and Salvatore Greco knows I'm going to find him eventually, and a man who knows he's running out of time makes unpredictable decisions. He looked at me steadily, the warmth of the study, the low lamp. His hands on the desk, very still. What I did last night, he said. In the hall. I shouldn't have. You steadied me. I held on longer than was necessary. The directness of it landed in my chest. Dante. I'm telling you because you should know where I am. His voice was careful, precise. Not because I'm asking you to. I'm not asking anything. I'm telling you, I know what I want. And I know that what I want is not the same as what you've decided about this yet. And I'm not going to push. That's not. He stopped. Started again. You came back here because you had no choice. I'm aware of that. And I'm not going to use this situation to, I know, I said. Quietly. He looked at me. I know you're not, I said. The silence between us was different than the silences before. It had a different weight. The weight of something named carefully and set down carefully and left there between us without being forced. I put my hand on my belly. She was moving again. She always moved when I was feeling something I hadn't named yet. "I'm going to take a walk," I said. "In the garden. If that's, Luca will go with you." "I know." I stood. "Dante." He looked up. "Tuesday," I said. 11 Tuesdays, that's a lot of bad diner coffee." Something happened in his face. Very small. The near arrival of something that didn't quite land. "The pie was acceptable," he said. I left before he could see what that did to me. The painting arrived on a Thursday. It came by courier. A flat, rectangular package in acid-free wrapping, with my name on it in my university supervisor's handwriting. Professor Bianchi, who had been, before everything, the most important teacher I'd ever had. He had tracked me, somehow. I found out later that he had been trying to reach me for 4 months, that he had finally called the county clinic and they had given him only that I was well and safe, and that he had sent the painting as a way of, I didn't know, reaching back to something, keeping a thread intact. It was a small Flemish panel piece, 17th century, severe water damage along one edge and a later varnish that had yellowed badly. The note said, "Whenever you're ready, there's no rush. B." I held the package for a long time before I opened it. Rosa watched me from the kitchen doorway. She didn't say anything. She was very good at that. She saw things and held the observation gently, without pressure. "May I use the table?" I asked. "The table is yours," she said, and then she left me alone in the kitchen with the painting, which was the kindest thing she could have done. I worked for 3 hours. I didn't mean to. I sat down to look at it, just to assess, to get the orientation of the damage, to begin building the picture of what had happened to it and in what order. But assessment slid into examination and examination into careful preliminary cleaning at one corner, just to test the varnish response. And then I was fully in it, the way I always got fully in it. The rest of the world going quiet. My hands knowing what to do without my brain having to narrate it. I heard him before I saw him. The quality of the room changed first. The slight shift in the air that Dante's presence created. Then his footsteps, which were nearly silent, but not entirely. Not to me. He had learned to make a small sound when approaching a room I was in, because in the first year of our marriage he had startled me twice, and the second time I had knocked a cup off a counter and we had both stood there looking at the broken pieces, and he had said, very quietly, "I'll make a sound from now on," and he had. Every time, for as long as we were in the same house. He still did. He came into the kitchen and stopped. I was at the table with the panel piece propped against a bookstand, my magnifying loupe around my neck, a cotton swab in one hand, and the particular focus face I apparently made when doing this. I had been told about the face. "I didn't know you had brought supplies," he said. "I didn't. I made do with what was in the house." I gestured at the small assembly of improvised materials, cotton balls, mineral spirits from under the sink, the loupe from my bag which I apparently never removed from my bag even when fleeing my life. Professor Bianchi sent the painting. He came closer, looked the panel. He had always been genuinely curious about the work, not performing interest, but actually looking, which was one of the things about him that had surprised me early and kept surprising me. "Water damage," he said, "and a later varnish over the original. Whoever owned it last was trying to protect it, but they used the wrong compound for the age. It's yellowed, see here." I pointed with the swab. "The original palette underneath is much warmer. You can see it at the edges where the varnish is thinner." He leaned in, close enough that I was aware of him in the peripheral way I was always aware of him, the particular warmth of someone standing at the edge of your space, the almost temperature of him. "How do you know what's under it?" he asked. "You develop a sense for it. The damage tells you the story. What happened, in what order. The yellowing happened after the water damage, see? The varnish was applied as a response. Someone was trying to save it." I paused. Not always the wrong instinct, just the wrong material. He was quiet for a moment. "You can fix it," he said. "I can work toward the original. I can get closer. You never get all the way back. There's always some record of what happened. You just clarify it. Reduce the obstruction. Let the original show through as much as possible." He was looking at me, not the painting. I realized I had just described with professional precision exactly what I was also doing here. In this house. With him. I felt my face go warm. I looked at the panel. "The child," he said. "I'd like to be there. For the birth." I looked up. "If you want me there," he added. "I'm not." He stopped. "I'm asking." This was the thing about Dante that I had never fully known how to hold, the asking. He was a man who commanded everything and asked the things that mattered. The distinction between those two behaviors was the whole of him, really, the dangerous efficiency of command, and then, in the specific moments, this, I'm asking. "Yes," I said, "I want you there." He nodded, looked at the painting again. "She'll need a name," he said. "I know. Have you thought about?" "I've been thinking about Elena," I said. "After my mother." A pause. "That's a good name," he said quietly. And then, "My mother's name was Sophia." I remember. "Elena Sophia," he said. "If you want." I looked at the panel piece in front of me. The small Flemish woman in it, 17th century, surviving centuries of damage, still, beneath it all, herself. "Elena Sophia Caruso," I said. He made a sound that was not quite words. When I looked at him, his face was doing something I had never seen it do, something unguarded and slightly fractured, the look of a man experiencing an emotion that was arriving too quickly for his usual management of it. He turned away before it completed itself. "I'll let you work," he said. "Dante." He stopped. "My uncle," I said. "He's not. I don't think he's just going to go quiet when he finds out I've told you. I know. He has people. He's always had people I didn't know about." "I know," he said again. "Which is why—" He turned back. Something had settled in him. The operational version, steady and dangerous. "Which is why you tell me anything that seems wrong. Any call, any visit, any feeling that something is off. You tell me. Promise me. I promise." He held my eyes for one more second. Then he nodded and left. I sat in the kitchen with the Flemish panel and my cotton swab and the ghost warmth of where he had been standing, and I thought, the danger has moved inside. It was not him I was afraid of. It was what happened to me around him. The way the careful distance I had maintained for 14 months kept developing small holes whenever he asked, instead of commanded. Whenever he said, "I'm asking," like it cost him something to say it, the painting looked back at me. Someone tried to protect you with the wrong material, I thought. And it yellowed. And now someone is going to spend a very long time carefully reducing that damage. I understood the work. I understood what it would take. I was less certain I understood how long I was willing to wait before letting myself want the outcome. That night, I heard him at 2 a.m. in the kitchen. I lay in the east room and listened to the sounds of the house at that hour. The specific quality of silence in a big old house in winter, the occasional sound of a door, the kettle, the distant muffled conversation between him and someone on the phone. He was working. At 2 in the morning. On whatever a man works on at 2 in the morning when someone is threatening what he has decided to protect. I put my hand on my belly. "Your father," I said quietly to Elena Sophia, who was awake and apparently interested, "is very complicated." She moved. "I know," I said, "I know. The attempt came on a Saturday morning. We were in the car, Luca driving, Dante in the passenger seat, me in the back, returning from a second appointment with Dr. Park. The appointment had gone well. Elena Sophia was head down and cooperative, and the doctor had said in the manner of a woman who had seen everything, 2 weeks at the outside, possibly less. I had been thinking about that, about 2 weeks at the outside, about what that meant. I did not see the second car until it was already sideways across the intersection ahead of us. Luca said something in Italian that I had never heard before and probably meant something very bad. Dante turned in his seat. One smooth movement, already reaching back, his hand on my arm. "Down," he said, "now. Head down. Stay low. Dante, Valentina." His voice was quiet and absolute. "Down." I went down. What followed was approximately 4 minutes. I know this because I counted later, from the moment the first car blocked us to the moment the door opened and Dante pulled me out. It felt like 40 minutes, and also like 4 seconds. There was the sound of the second SUV arriving. The family's car, the backup I hadn't known, was always following at a distance. There was the sound of men, the specific crack of things I am not going to describe precisely because they are not things I want to keep. And then, silence. A different kind of silence than before. Then, the door. Then Dante's hands, pulling me out of the car. He ran his hands over me. Both hands, fast and efficient, checking for damage. My arms, my shoulders, my face. The look on his face during this check was something I had not seen before. Not the operational stillness. Something under it. Something raw and close to the surface and barely managed. "Are you hurt?" he said. "No. The baby." "Are you hurt?" he said again, as if the question was so necessary it required repeating before anything else could happen. "I'm fine. We're fine. Dante." He pulled me against him, not carefully, not with the restrained deliberateness he brought to every touch. He pulled me against his chest and held me there, both arms, and I felt the rapid beat of his heart against my face, and the warmth of him, that specific warmth, surrounding me entirely, and I did not pull away. I put my face against his chest and breathed. "Okay," I said. To him or to myself, I wasn't sure. "Okay. I've got you," he said. Low and close and unlike him. "Piccola. I've got you." Not cold now. Not the first chapter's cold possessiveness. This was something else entirely. We stayed like that for a moment that had no protocol. Later. 2 hours later, in the house, after the doctor had been called and confirmed we were uninjured, after Dante had spoken to people in a room I was not in, after Rosa had made tea and held my hands between hers without speaking, Dante came to the east room. I was on the bed, on my side, which was the only comfortable position left. He knocked and waited, and came in when I said to, and sat in the rocking chair and looked at me. "Salvatore moved faster than I expected," he said. "You expected this. Not this exactly, but something. He knows I've been looking at the books. He knows he's running out of time." He paused. This was a message, not a serious attempt. It was too disorganized, but next time he'll be more careful. And what do we do about next time? We're careful too. More support. I'm moving people around. He paused. "And you don't leave this house without me. I know that's. I understand." He looked at me. Something in his face shifted. "You're not going to argue. I'm 8.5 months pregnant and someone just tried to, whatever they were trying. I'm not going to argue about security right now." A pause. "All right." The room was quiet. The lake light was failing outside. Late afternoon in February. The dark coming early. "You went feral," I said. He looked at me. "In the car. After. The way you held on." I stalked. "I've seen you in control of a room. I've seen you make grown men step back just by being still. I've never seen you lose it. I didn't lose it. You held me like I was going to disappear." Very long silence. "Yes," he said finally. "I did." His hands were on his knees, very still. I watched him arrive at something and decide to stay there. "I've been thinking," he said, "since you came back, about the 14 months, what I did with it, and what I didn't." He looked at his hands. "I assumed you left because you chose to. I told myself you'd made a rational choice about what his world cost, and He stopped. "I let that be the story. Because the alternative was that something had happened to you and I didn't go looking." Yes. The word carried everything. He did not embellish it. He let it sit. I thought about the night I had left, the very specific desolation of packing in 20 minutes and not calling him, because I had been told there was nothing to call about. Because I had been told the decision had already been made. I thought you didn't want me, I said. I thought the entire marriage had been… No, he said. Low and very clear. Never. I looked at the ceiling. She was moving. She was always moving at the worst moments, which I was choosing to interpret as solidarity. I'm afraid, I said to the ceiling, of what this is, of wanting, of letting myself. I know I don't want to be back here because I had to be. I don't want to, I stopped. Started again. I need to choose this. If I'm here, I need it to be because I chose it. And I don't know yet if Valentina. His voice was very quiet. I'm not going anywhere, and I'm not going to push you somewhere you haven't gotten to yourself. A pause. But I need you to know what you saw today, what I am, when something threatens. I saw it. And I thought about it honestly, about the violence I had heard and the efficiency of it, and the absence of apology and the way he had been unmade for one moment by the thought of something happening to me. And, I said carefully, I know what you are. I've always known. I married you knowing. I turned my head to look at him. That's not what I'm afraid of. What are you afraid of? Wanting you enough to accept all of it, I said, and then losing you anyway? He looked at me. The rocking chair did not move. The lake outside went gray and dark. His hands were still on his knees. Piccola, he said, and the word was different now. Not cold, not the chapter 1 classification. Warmer, the word of a man who is saying, I see exactly you, and has no other language for it. You're not going to lose me. You can't promise that. No, he agreed, but I can tell you I've never in my life been afraid to go somewhere until now, until there was a reason to want to come back. The first intimate moment came quietly, not with ceremony. He crossed the room, sat on the edge of the bed, not close, leaving room, offered his hand palm up. I put my hand in his. We sat like that in the failing light, his hand warm around mine, and did not speak, and the warmth of it was not the warmth of his coat in the diner, or his arms in the car, or his palm on my back in the hallway. It was the warmth of a choice, his and mine, both. War has arrived, he said finally, quietly. Matter of fact, I know. He did not let go of my hand. Luca was shot on a Tuesday, not in a dramatic confrontation, not in the kind of scene that announces itself as significant. He was walking from the parking structure to the house at 6:45 in the evening, and someone he didn't recognize until too late stepped out from between two parked cars. The bullet took him in the shoulder. He managed to get inside. Rosa found him at the kitchen door. I was in the kitchen when he came through it. I had been at the table with the Flemish panel, and a new set of proper supplies Dante had sourced from somewhere. And then I was on my feet, and Luca was leaning against the doorframe with a ruined shoulder and a face that had gone very white and very concentrated. Don't, he started. Sit down, I said, right now, sit. He sat. Rosa was already on the phone. I was already looking at the wound with the specific quality of attention that comes from 3 hours of YouTube medical videos watched in a county apartment when you are 8 months pregnant and beginning to understand that the world you had re-entered had specific dangers. Not the artery, I said. The bleeding it's controllable. Rosa, clean towels, the white ones, not the kitchen ones. I know what towels, Rosa said. Luca looked at me. Even in this condition, gray-white and managing pain. His eyes were clear, and there was something in them I had not seen before. Not surprise exactly. A reassessment. You're doing fine, I told him, because he was, and because I have learned that people who are hurt and maintaining control need someone to tell them it's working. He nodded. Very small. Dante came in 4 minutes later. He saw Luca, and he saw me with my hands on a towel pressed to Luca's shoulder, and his face did something I felt in my chest even from across the kitchen. He crossed the room, knelt beside Luca, put his hand on the back of Luca's neck in a gesture I had never seen him make. Brief, wordless, the gesture of a man who has loved someone like a brother and refuses to express it any other way. I'm fine, Luca said. I know, Dante said, and then to me, you're all right. Yes, the family doctor arrived 20 minutes later. Marco arrived 30 seconds after that, flushed and breathless in a way that was not performance. Is it the shoulder? He looked at Luca. Is it bad? It'll heal, the doctor said. Marco put his hand on the doorframe. His face was doing something complicated. Good, he said, very quietly. Good. Then, I have also been having a pain in my shoulder this week. Left side. I mentioned it to Dr. Chen and she said, Marco, Rosa said. Right. Yes. He straightened. Looked at Luca. Don't do that again. I'll try, Luca said dryly. I mean it. There was a moment in the car when I thought, he stopped, pressed his hand to his sternum. I don't want to talk about it. Then don't, Rosa said. I won't. He looked at the ceiling. Dr. Chen told me I needed to reduce stress. I told her this was my baseline. She said that was. He paused. She said that was the most depressing thing she had ever heard. Luca made a sound that was possibly a laugh, immediately punished by his shoulder. Dante was watching all of this with the expression of a man managing several things simultaneously. Then he came to me. Come, he said. Quietly. He took me to the sitting room, the one at the front of the house with the tall windows and the view of the street where Luca had walked 6 hours ago without knowing what was waiting. This was Salvatore, Dante said. I know. He's not going to stop. And he's getting more direct because he's getting more desperate. He was standing at the window, not looking at me. Looking at the street. He knows what I know now, and he knows what I'm going to do about it. What are you going to do about it? He turned. End it. But not tonight. Tonight I need to make sure you, Dante. I stood up. He stopped. I need to say something and I need you to listen without trying to manage it. He was very still. I can leave, I said, right now, tonight. I can call a car and go somewhere Salvatore doesn't know about and have this baby safely and build something. I stopped. Took a breath. I can do that. I know how to disappear. I did it for 14 months. I met his eyes. That door is open. It's actually open. I'm not using it as leverage and I'm not performing a threat. I'm telling you there is a door. He looked at me. I know, he said, and I'm standing in front of it. I felt the thing cracking in my chest that I had kept carefully sealed. And I don't want to go through it. Very quiet. I don't want to, I said again. I know what this costs. I watched Luca come through the kitchen door tonight with a bullet in his shoulder. I know what this world charges. And I stopped, put my hand on my belly. I'm choosing this. I'm standing here and choosing this, with full information. He crossed the room. His hands came up to my face, both palms, careful, warm, and he tilted my face up and looked at me for a long moment with something in his eyes that he had been carrying for a long time. I know what you're giving up, he said. I know what it costs. Don't manage it, I said. Don't. I'm not managing it. His voice was low. I'm saying, I know, and I'm going to spend a very long time making sure you never regret it. I put my hands over his. The warmth. Always the warmth of his hands. Everywhere his hands had ever been. I had walked back through the door myself. No one had forced it. No one had saved me from leaving. I had seen the price, and I had looked at the man who had driven himself to the airport at 6:15 in the morning and eaten bad diner coffee every Tuesday, and I had looked at my uncle's name on the ledger of things that had been done to both of us, and I had chosen, not the darkness, him, the specific man who was also inseparably the darkness. What happens next? I said. I go to war, he said. Then be careful. Always. His thumbs moved along my cheekbones, barely there, the warmth. And Piccola, yes? When this is over, he said, I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to know that I'm not asking because of the baby, or because of what you're owed, or because of any version of obligation. He looked at me. I'm going to ask because you look at me and you don't perform anything. You just look. And I have never in my life known what to do with that. And I have also never in my life wanted anything more than to figure it out. I understood then what I had always done, what had undone him from the first moment, not courage, not beauty, the absence of performance, the simple, exhausted steadiness of a woman who had nothing left to pretend with. He had never had that, not once, from anyone. Ask, I said. When it's over, ask. He held my face in his hands for one more moment. Then war arrived in earnest. They took me 3 days after Luca was shot. I don't say this to create drama. I say it because it is what happened and because I want to account for it honestly, which is the only way I know how to survive remembering it. They were Salvatore's men. There were 4 of them, and they came through a service entrance that had been left unlatched by someone inside the house, which was the betrayal. Which was the thing that came second. After the shock of the room going wrong, and hands on my arms and the specific instruction I received at that moment, which I followed because I was 9 months pregnant and fighting physically, was not a strategy I had. I went with them. Because the alternative was worse, and because I am, when stripped to it, a practical person. They took me to a building on the south side, a warehouse, the kind that has been used for various purposes over various decades and retains the atmosphere of all of them. Cold, high ceilings, the specific quality of dark that exists when the windows have been painted over. There were chairs. I sat in one. My back announced itself with great authority. I breathed through it. Salvatore arrived 20 minutes later. He had aged since I last saw him. Not badly, but significantly. The way men age when they are carrying something they cannot put down. He was wearing a good coat, and he looked when he came through the door and saw me. Genuinely sorry. Valentina, he said, with the voice of a man who had thought, until recently, that he could avoid this specific moment. Uncle, I said. He sat across from me. His hands were in his lap. The 2 men at the door were not looking at us. They were looking at the door, which was where the threat, from their perspective, would come from. Dante, eventually. Dante, coming. You know I didn't want this, Salvatore said. You sent me away so I wouldn't see your books. A pause. I sent you away so you would be safe. You sent me away so you would be safe. He looked at me. His eyes were my father's eyes. The same shape, the same dark color, the same quality of feeling more than they showed. I had loved this man. I had trusted him. He had sat across from me 14 months ago and given me a lie with the precision of a surgeon. You were in his world, he said. That world. I know what that world does to women. I know what it did to your aunt. I wanted you out before I found your theft. Before something happened to you, he said, with the flat certainty of a man who has rehearsed this defense and believes it. What I took, it was not, he stopped. It was not for nothing. It went to people who needed it. It went to whom? I said. Specifically. A pause. It doesn't matter now. It matters to me. He looked at his hands. And then, very quietly, your father owed people. When he died, your inheritance would have gone to those debts and there would have been nothing. I redirected funds to cover it, so that what your parents left you was yours. The silence was very long. I processed this, the specific, monstrous, internally coherent logic of it. He had stolen from the Caruso family to protect my inheritance from my father's debts. He had removed me from the house so I wouldn't expose the theft. He had used my love and my trust and my reasonable belief in his care to accomplish both objectives. And he had, on some structural level, meant to protect me. You should have told me, I said. You would have told him. Maybe. I met his eyes. But you didn't give me the chance. You decided. You calculated and you decided and you moved me around a board like a piece. I felt something harden in me. Not hatred, which would have been simpler. Something more complicated. I was carrying his child, Uncle. I was 8 weeks along when I left this house and I didn't know it yet, and you. I stopped. His face had gone white. You didn't know, I said. No, he said, very quietly. I didn't know. We sat in that. The warehouse was cold. My back was giving me serious information that I was working to interpret with the appropriate urgency. I breathed carefully and thought about the things I was good at. Reading damage. Identifying the original work beneath the ruin. Staying calm when the object in front of me was in crisis. This ends one of two ways, I said. Dante comes here and you decide how that goes. Or, you let me go now, right now, and you call him yourself and you tell him everything. I know what he'll do, I said. I know, but you having a conversation with him is different from him finding you in a warehouse with me. I looked at him. He has a daughter, who is going to arrive very soon, and I need to not be in this warehouse when that happens. Salvatore looked at me for a long time. My back gave me information I could no longer defer. Uncle, I said quietly, my water just broke. The next 90 minutes were a negotiation of an entirely different kind. Salvatore, to his credit, which is a sentence I did not expect to write, called Dante himself. He kept the phone on speaker so I could hear. He said where we were. He said I was in labor. He said he would wait. The two men at the door looked at each other with the expression of people who had not anticipated this development. I breathed through contractions. I had read everything. I knew the timeline. I was not particularly afraid, which surprised me actually, the absence of fear. I was very focused. This was a thing happening and I was going to move through it. Salvatore sat across from me and did not leave the room. Tell me about your father's debt, I said between contractions. Because if I was going to be in labor in a warehouse, I was at least going to understand the full picture. He told me. It took 20 minutes. By the end, I understood the complete shape of what he had done, the monstrous care of it, the theft that was also protection, the lie that was also, in his accounting, love. That's not absolution, I said. No, he said, but I understand it. He looked at me. Something very old moved through his face. Dante arrived with 12 men at the 30-minute mark. I heard the building go very still, which was the specific sound I had learned to recognize. Then his footsteps, which I would know anywhere. He came through the door. He saw me first, checked me, the way he always checked me, fast and complete, and then his eyes went to Salvatore. Salvatore stood, did not move, did not reach for anything. They looked at each other across the warehouse. I called you, Salvatore said. I know, Dante said. She's in labor. I know. His voice was very controlled. We're leaving now, and then you and I will have a conversation. Salvatore nodded. Sat back down. He was not going anywhere. Dante came to me. Knelt, put both hands on my face, warm, always warm, and looked at me with everything he was not going to say in front of his men. I'm fine, I said. I know you are. A pause. The ghost of something at his mouth. You negotiated with him. I had options and I used them. While in labor. It was early labor. I had time. He made the sound that I had come to understand was the furthest he could go toward laughter when laughter was not the correct register. He picked me up. I did not argue. Some moments are not for argument. He carried me out of the warehouse into the winter night, and the cold hit my face and the lake smell was there. Even here, even this far south, and Elena Sofia was still coming, ready or not. Elena Sofia Caruso arrived at 4:37 in the morning. She weighed 7 pounds, 2 ounces. She had Dante's coloring and my stubbornness, which the nursing staff confirmed within approximately 4 minutes of her arrival in the world. She made her objections to the situation known clearly and without apology, and then she looked up at the light above the delivery table with the focused attention of someone who had already decided to catalog everything. Dante was there for all of it. He did not speak much. He held my hand through the parts that required hand-holding, which was most of it, and he did not flinch, and he did not perform calm. He simply was calm, the way he was calm, the way Stillwater was calm. And when it was over and the nurse put Elena Sofia in his arms for the first time, he went completely silent. I watched him hold her. He held her the way he held everything that mattered, with his full attention and with extreme care and with the slightly unfamiliar quality of a man encountering something that did not have a protocol. He looked down at her and she looked up at him, and the room went very quiet. He did not say anything for almost a full minute. Then, very quietly, to her, "Ciao, Piccola." Not to me. To her. The nickname landing between them with all the warmth that had been gathering for 9 months. I felt something complete in my chest. The word of a man who did not know what else to say and chose, of all words, that one. Marco appeared at the hospital at 6 a.m. He was the first non-medical person through the door, slightly disheveled, eyes red in a way that he was aggressively not acknowledging. "She's beautiful," he said, looking at Elena in my arms. Then, to Dante, "She has your glare." "She's 3 hours old," Dante said. "Dante, she has your glare." He looked at me. "How are you feeling? Do you need anything? I can—" "Dr. Chen gave me a list of postpartum. Marco," I said. "Come meet her." He sat beside the bed with the care of a man handling explosive material and looked at Elena Sofia for a long time. She looked back at him with her father's steady attention. "Hello," Marco said to her, very seriously. She was not impressed. "She already doesn't respect me," he said. "This is going to be a theme." "She's 3 hours old," Dante said again. "Instincts develop early." Marco straightened, pressed his hand to his chest, briefly, involuntarily. His eyes went wet for just 1 second before he reassembled himself. "She's perfect," he said, with the directness of a man who has decided to say the real thing despite himself. Dante looked at him, said nothing. But something passed between them, the specific communication of men who have been in difficult places together and know what the other carries. "I'm gonna get coffee," Marco said briskly. "Does anyone want coffee? Dr. Chen says I should reduce my caffeine intake. But she also said I should reduce my stress and, priorities." He left before anyone could respond. Dante watched him go with an expression that was, for one fraction of a second, completely unguarded. "He cried in the car," Luca said from the doorway. "On the drive here." "I know," Dante said. "He doesn't know that I know. I know." A pause. "Don't tell him." "Obviously not. We were in the hospital for 2 days. Dante did not leave. He slept in the chair by the window. 2 hours the first night, 3 the second, which Luca reported to me with the air of a man providing a significant data point. He held Elena when I needed to rest. He read to her, quietly, from his phone, articles about early infant development, which I overheard from the bed and which I did not interrupt because it was the most perfectly, specifically Dante thing I had ever witnessed. On the second morning, I woke to find him asleep in the chair with Elena asleep on his chest. His hand was curved over her back, automatically even in sleep, the warmth of him around her. The same warmth that had been in his coat in the diner, in his hands in the hallway, in his palms against my face in the warehouse. I lay in the hospital bed and looked at them and understood that I had already made my decision, had made it probably, somewhere between the diner and the East Room, between the hallway in the dark and the warehouse. Had made it and been making it and was only now acknowledging that the making was complete. On the day of our discharge, Dante sat on the edge of the hospital bed while I dressed Elena in the going-home outfit Rosa had sent. He watched me work the tiny buttons with the careful attention of a man who was learning something he intended to keep. "Salvatore," he said. "I know," I said. "Tell me." He had gone the morning after Elena's birth. I had not been there. I had been in a hospital room with a newborn and a nurse, and the specific days of the first 24 hours. And Dante had left for 4 hours and returned and said nothing. Except it's done, and I had chosen, that day, to wait. "He gave me everything," Dante said. "The accounts, the contacts, the full record of what he took and what he did with it." A pause. "Your father's debts. It's more complicated than I thought." "I know. He told me in the warehouse." He looked at me. "He told you." "We had time." I finished the last button. Elena regarded me with the focused disapproval of someone who had opinions about her outfit. What did you do with him? He's gone, Dante said. Not I didn't. He stopped. He's in Italy, his sister's house. He'll stay there. You let him go. You're his family, Dante said simply, and he covered your father's debts. And he told me himself. He paused. And he is not what he could have been. If he had been worse, what he did was wrong. The way he did it was... He stopped again. But he's not the worst version of the choices he made. I looked at him. You're generous, I said. I'm practical. He is more useful to me outside of the ground than under it, and Elena will know her family. He looked at our daughter. The parts that are worth knowing. I thought about paintings. About original works beneath layers of damage. About what it costs to work back towards something true. Dante, I said. You said you were going to ask me something. He went still. When it was over, I said. You said you'd ask. He looked at me, Elena in my arms, the February sunlight through the hospital window. He stood up, reached into his pocket. He had something in his hand. Something small, which he held out to me. It was my wedding ring, not a new ring. My ring. The one from our original wedding. The one I had left on the dresser in the East Room when I walked out with my 20-minute bag. The one that had sat in his house for 14 months. You kept it, I said. I found it 2 days after you left, he said. I've had it. He looked at it. I'm not asking because of Elena or the house or what we've survived. I'm not asking because it's the logical next step. I'm asking because you look at me and you don't. I know why you're asking, I said. He met my eyes. Yes, I said. Very quiet. The hospital room, the winter light, our daughter between us. He put the ring on my finger, his hands warm, always warm. The warmth of them around my hand, around the ring, around everything that had survived the damage and been brought back to itself. Piccola, he said. Completely warm now. Completely earned. The word that had traveled 14 chapters of this story, from cold to this, from possession to tenderness to the most specific, accurate name he had ever given anything. I looked up at him, and I did the thing I always did. I looked at him, steady and tired and honest and present, and I gave him nothing but my eyes. He smiled. Really smiled. Which I had never seen, not once in the year of our first marriage and the 14 months of separation. The full, unguarded thing, and it landed on his face like something that had been waiting for permission. Still, he said, after all of that, you still just look at me. It's all I've got, I said. It's everything, he said. The man who had ordered the attack on our car was not Salvatore. This was the thing we had not known, the thing that had been waiting underneath the thing we thought we knew. The slow mystery completing itself in the worst possible timing, 3 weeks after Elena's birth. When I was still in the specific fog of new parenthood and Dante was running on 4 hours of broken sleep, and the operational tension of a man who knew something was still unresolved. His name was Ricci. He had been Salvatore's partner, not in the family theft, but in a separate arrangement that predated the Caruso marriage by years. Salvatore had not known when he was moving my uncle around as a variable in his calculations that Ricci had been building his own case against the Caruso family, using Salvatore as a blind. Salvatore had been a tool. Ricci had been the architect. He wanted the Caruso territory, not just the money, not just the accounts, the entire Chicago operation, which he had spent 2 years positioning to collapse by engineering the theft. Engineering my removal, engineering the specific set of vulnerabilities that Salvatore's panic had then exploited. It was patient, brilliant, and deeply evil. And when Dante laid it out to me in the study one evening with Elena asleep in the bassinet by the window, I sat and listened to the whole shape of it and felt something cold and clarifying move through me. He's been waiting, I said, for Salvatore to be dealt with. Because when Salvatore goes, the account he was using to cover. Exactly, Dante said. The moment Salvatore's arrangement closes, Ricci can present his own claim. He has documentation. Manufactured. But But it would take time to disprove, and time is what he's buying. He looked at me. You understood that fast. I read damage, I said. I can see the structure of it. He was quiet for a moment. How would you dismantle it? The documentation, I told him, it took 20 minutes. It was, I realized as I talked, exactly the process I used for overpainted canvases. The systematic removal of false layers, working backward from the most recent intervention to the original surface, identifying at each stage what was genuine and what was applied over it. Dante listened with the full presence attention he gave, everything that mattered. Your professor, he said. Bianchi. He has colleagues in document authentication? One of the best in Europe is a former student of his. Would you call him? Yes, I said. Then that's how we start. We fought as a unit. That was how I would describe it later, to myself if no one else. Not him protecting me and me surviving, not me supporting him from a safe distance. The actual collaboration, his operational knowledge and my technical knowledge, his network and my relationships in a world entirely unlike his, working the same problem from different angles until it collapsed. Professor Bianchi's contact authenticated our counter-documentation in 6 days. Luca, recovering, formidable, and highly motivated, provided the physical backup. 2 of Dante's most trusted men, whose loyalty had been confirmed in the crucible of the past 2 months, were the ones who found Ricci. The confrontation happened in a building I was not in. Dante came home at 3 in the morning. I heard him on the stairs. The particular quality of his step when he was exhausted under his operational control. I was awake, nursing Elena in the rocking chair by the window, the lake dark outside and the lamp on. He came in. Saw me. Came and sat on the edge of the bed. He was not physically hurt. He was tired in the specific way of a man who has done something final. It's over, he said. How over? He'll face his own people's judgment, Dante said. I made sure the right people know what he planned, what he used them for. A pause. That's a specific kind of consequence in our world. Not clean, I said. No. He looked at his hands. I had to become something tonight to end it. Something I'm not proud of. You came back from it. I'm here, he said. That's not the same thing. He looked up, at me, at Elena, at the lamp, at the lake. No. But it's what I can give you right now. I'm here. And I will work on the rest. I put my hand on his. He turned his over and we sat like that, his palm against mine, warm, the same warmth as always, while Elena finished nursing and the lake went gray with the approaching dawn. Luca's shoulder? I asked. Healing, he'll be back. Marco called me 7 times during the operation, said he was monitoring his blood pressure. The ghost of something at his mouth. Nadia answered when he called the clinic. He forgot he'd programmed her direct line. He talked to her for 20 minutes instead of me. How did that go? He hasn't told me, but he's been, Dante considered. He's been different since, quieter. It's alarming. I pressed my lips together. Alarming as in something is wrong, or alarming as in something is right. Alarming as in Marco being quiet is always a sign that he is either very sick or very happy, and I cannot determine which. I think, I said carefully, it might be the second one. Dante looked at me. She spoke to him for 20 minutes. I know. She's never spoken to him for more than 3. I know. We sat with this. Elena had fallen asleep, warm weight in my arms, outside, the very first gray of dawn beginning over the lake. We lost things, Dante said, coming through this. Yes, I'm different than I was. Yes, I said, so am I. He looked at me. Is that? It's true, I said. It's not bad, it's just true. He nodded. Looked at Elena, put one finger out and she closed her hand around it in sleep. The automatic grip of a newborn. The oldest reflex in the world. And something in his face opened completely. It's over, he said again. Quietly. As if saying it twice was the only way to believe it. It's over, I said. We watched the dawn come in over the lake. and the darkness gave way slowly. The way it always does. Not all at once, but in degrees. Each degree a little more light than the one before, until suddenly you notice that you can see clearly and you don't know exactly when that happened. Only that it did. Spring came. It came the way spring comes in Chicago. Grudgingly. And then all at once, the lake changing color from gray to blue in what felt like a single morning. Elena was 6 weeks old and had developed opinions about the following: milk temperature, lukewarm at absolute minimum, the angle of the rocking chair, exact, non-negotiable, and the sound of Marco's voice, apparently acceptable, possibly even preferable, as she reliably stopped crying when he came into the room, which Marco treated as a personal validation of historic proportions. She knows quality, he told me solemnly, holding her in the kitchen while Rosa watched with the expression of a woman who had seen everything. She's 6 weeks old, Dante said. Dante, she responds to me. Specifically, do you know what Dr. Chen said when I told her that? He paused for effect. She said that was very sweet. Silence. She said it was sweet, Marco said with the weight of a man reporting a conversion experience. Dr. Chen, who has described me as, and I quote, my most persistent and least medically complex patient. She said it was sweet. What were the exact words? I asked. That's very sweet, Marco. He said them carefully, the way you say words that have been playing in your head for 3 days. With a... He made a vague gesture. A thing, with her face. A smile? I offered. A thing, he said firmly. I don't want to overinterpret. Rosa put down her knife, turned around, looked at Marco with an expression I had never seen on her face. Something soft and entirely unguarded. Dio mio, she said. Ask her to dinner. I can't just ask her. To dinner, like a person. She's my doctor. That's get a different doctor, Rosa said. There are other doctors in Chicago. Marco opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Elena, who was looking at him with the serious attention of a person who has not yet learned to perform indifference. She thinks I should, he told Elena. Elena did not disagree. He called Nadia Chen that afternoon. The conversation lasted 45 minutes. I know because I could hear it from the East Room, not the words, just the sound of his voice shifting register approximately 12 minutes in, from the performed confidence of Marco Vitelli, consigliere, to something quieter and more honest, the voice of a man who was surprised to find himself telling the truth. He came up afterward and knocked on my door. She said yes, he said, with the expression of a man who has received news he had not allowed himself to believe was possible. Good, I said. He stood in the doorway for a moment. Then I've been in love with her for 2 years. I know. How did you... You described her as not warm with approximately the same tone you'd use for irreplaceable, I said. He thought about this. That's very perceptive. I read damage, I said. Comes with practice. He went back downstairs. I heard him start telling Rosa, and I heard Rosa say something in rapid Italian that sounded like it had been prepared in advance. Dante asked me properly on a Thursday evening in April, which was to say, he had already asked in the hospital with the ring, and we had been living in this house for 2 months with Elena and the careful, daily work of becoming the people we were going to be. But this was a different ask. He found me in the kitchen with the Flemish panel, which was nearly finished. The varnish work had gone slowly, properly, with the care it deserved. The little woman in the 17th century had been emerging by degrees, her original palette warming back toward what the painter had intended. He came in, looked at the painting, looked at me. Rosa's made dinner, he said. In a minute. It's the good kind of dinner. Then, definitely in a minute. He sat down across from me. In the kitchen. At the table where Marco had diagnosed himself. And Rosa had made soup. And I had eaten my first meal back in this house. He sat and he looked at me with the complete attention that was the most Dante thing about him. I want to tell you something, he said. I set down the swab, looked at him. When you came back, he said, when I found you in that diner, I thought I was going to fix something, bring you back and resolve the situation. I had a version of it in my head. He paused. That version had me doing most of the things and you being somewhere safe? That's not how it went, I said. No. Something moved at the corner of his mouth. You negotiated with your uncle while in labor. I had options. You diagnosed the Ritchie documentation problem in 15 minutes. You called your professor. He stopped. I keep thinking I'm protecting you and you keep solving the actual problem. Is that a complaint? No, he said. Quietly, it's the best thing that has ever happened to me. I looked at him. I want this, he said. Not the ring, not the ceremony, we've done those. I want the specific arrangement of us, the one where you say what you see and I listen, the one where I know something is wrong before you've said anything because you've gone quiet in a specific way, the one where, he stopped. I want the ordinary version, every version. The ordinary version is still this world, I said. Yes, it doesn't become safe. No. And I still have to stay here while you go do things in buildings I'm not in. I'm working on reducing that, he said, but yes, for now. I thought about the painting behind me, the original woman emerging, the damage still there in the record of the wood, but no longer obscuring, the work that could not be undone, visible, legible, part of the surface, but no longer between the viewer and what the painter had meant. Okay, I said. Okay, he agreed, as if it was very simple. Which, from a certain angle it was. Rosa's dinner was excellent. Marco was there, and Luca, and Rosa herself, and the 5 of us sat at the table in the kitchen and ate, and Elena slept in the bassinet by the window, and someone made a joke. Marco, probably, and someone else laughed, and the evening went on in the way evenings go when the danger is over and the ordinary life is reclaiming its ground, one quiet hour at a time. Under the table, Dante's hand found mine. He didn't say anything. I didn't either. The warmth of his hand. Always. The warmth that had been in the coat and in the hallway and in the warehouse and in the hospital room, and here now, in the kitchen, in the spring, in the life we were building, ordinary, radical, earned. A year is not enough time to change everything. It is, however, enough time to change the important things. The things you actually live in, day to day, which are not the dramatic moments but the texture underneath them, where you put your keys, who makes the coffee, whose turn it is to get up at 3 a.m., when Elena decides the night is for being awake. For the first 4 months, it was Dante's turn by default. He was already awake. Eventually, this became less true, and then it became something we negotiated, and the negotiation was its own kind of ordinary miracle. It was March again. Almost exactly 1 year from the diner on Halsted Street. Elena was 11 months old and had opinions about everything, which was exactly what I had expected, and she was pulling herself up on furniture and regarding each successful attempt with her father's expression of completing a task that had been correctly analyzed in advance. I was in the study with the Flemish panel. It was done, had been done since September. The original woman fully revealed and stabilized, ready to be returned. But Professor Bianchi had written to ask if I might consult on 2 other pieces, and there were materials on the desk and photographs on the screen and the particular quality of focus that came over me when I was reading Damage. I heard him, before I saw him. He always made a sound now, coming into a room I was in. Am I interrupting? Dante said. Probably. What is it? He came in and stood behind me, looking at the photograph on the screen. A 16th century portrait, terrible later editions obscuring the original composition. He looked at it with the genuine curiosity that was, still, one of the most unexpectedly specific things about him. You can see where they overpainted, he said. Right here. I pointed. The collar, that's 18th century. The original collar was almost certainly much simpler. You can see the undertones if you look at the edge. I paused. The original painter was better than whoever did this to it. How long to restore it? Months. Careful months. I sat back. I told Bianchi I could give him 2 days a week, 3 when Elena's older. He put his hand on my shoulder. The warmth of it. Through my shirt, I reached up and put my hand over his without thinking. He was quiet for a moment, Then she did it again. What? At breakfast. The thing you do. His voice was different, quieter, the specific register of a man saying something that costs him. I said something, I don't remember what, and she just looked at me, level, not performing anything, just looked. I felt something close in my chest. She's 11 months old, I said. I know. He sounded ruined by it in the best possible way. She already does it. I thought about the first time. The diner, the specific exhaustion that had stripped me of performance, and the way he had looked at me afterward with the expression of a man who had encountered a wall where he expected open space. The thing I did that no one in his world had ever done. The simple, honest act of looking without calculation. And now Elena, 11 months old, looking at her father over her breakfast. She's going to be a handful, I said. She already is. Takes after her mother. Completely, he said, with the warmth in his voice that had been building since the diner and was now simply the temperature of how he spoke to me. The way a room gets warmer because the sun has been in it for long. Enough. I turned to look at him. He looked at me. The way we always looked at each other. Me giving him everything in my eyes with no performance around it. Him receiving it with the complete attention of a man who has never gotten used to it and never intends to. Piccola, he said. The word that had been cold in a diner and then careful in a hallway and then desperate in a warehouse and then tender in a hospital room. The word that had traveled the whole length of this story and arrived here in the study on a March morning completely and permanently warm. Yes, I said. I love you, he said. Simple. No architecture around it. Dante, who said less than he meant with everything, saying for once exactly what he meant. I turned all the way around in the chair. He was there, the way he was always. There, present and warm and slightly impossible, and entirely mine. His hands came up when I stood. Automatic, the way Elena had closed her hand around his finger in the hospital, the oldest reflex of a person who has decided something matters. He held me, the warmth of him around me, always the same warmth, different meaning each time. I love you, I said, into his chest. Simple. We stood in the study in the March light while Elena moved around in the next room, pulling herself up on furniture and completing tasks she had correctly analyzed in advance, and the lake was blue outside, and everything we had survived was in the room with us, not as a wound, but as a record. The visible record of what had happened, stabilized and clarified, no longer between us and what we were. The damage was there. It would always be there. That was the truth of restoration. You did not erase the history, you revealed the original work beneath it. The history became part of the surface. The painting was both things, what it had always been, and everything that had happened to it. The trick was learning to hold both at once and call it beautiful. I was very good at that. He pressed his lips to the top of my head, held on. Elena, in the next room, pulled herself up on the coffee table and stood for 3 seconds on her own, before sitting back down with the expression of a person filing this information for later use. The lake, the light, the warmth of his hands, the life we built in the ruins of the one we'd lost, using every skill we had. Would you have chosen this, the danger, the cost, the rooms you cannot enter, for the man who kept coming back to a diner for 11 Tuesdays and still didn't know how to ask? Did Salvatore protect her or use her? When you held the full picture, did what he did look like love or a ledger? That's the thing about people who know how to read damage. They see both answers at the same time.